Okay, we're going to get started. If everybody in the tent wants to make their way over, and any stragglers from the exhibit. All right. Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm Elite Schultz, organizer of this event. First, I'd like to thank all of you, every single one of you, for coming out today. Thank you to all the partnering organizations for your help putting this event together, and special thanks to Harvard Chabad for generously hosting all of us here today and helping with a myriad of other planning tasks. I'd like to acknowledge that in the audience are people who lost family members and dear friends on October 7th and in the ensuing war. We will now have a moment of silence for those who we lost. Today marks 163 days since October 7th, and there are three words that keep running through my head: brutal, barbaric, and intentional. Everything that Hamas did on October 7th and since has been brutal, barbaric, and intentional. Their attack was meant to inflict immeasurable pain upon the people of Israel, and yes, it was also meant to bring suffering upon the non-combatants in Gaza in order to weaponize Western compassion. Hamas has been purposefully maximizing Palestinian suffering, using non-combatants as human shields, blocking them from getting to safe zones, stealing aid, shooting at Palestinian civilians in order to get good people around the world to stand on the side of evil. And it is working. They are leveraging Western ignorance and manipulating people on social media so that now, everywhere you look, there are good people taken in by Hamas propaganda and fiction. These people are now calling for ceasefire, completely oblivious to the fact that a ceasefire without return of the hostages and dismantling of Hamas will only bring more suffering to those who are innocent in Gaza, and seemingly without caring at all about the people of Israel. People are somehow unaware that this war would be over today if Hamas returned the hostages and laid down its weapons. People are joining in the delegitimization of Israel, denying Israel's right to defend itself, parroting age-old anti-Semitic tropes and blood libels. Some have even been taken in by Hamas' denial of the atrocities of October 7th. And some don't even know that Hamas is still holding 134 of our people hostage. So today, we are here to remind the world that the evil, sadistic Hamas rapist regime is holding 134 of our brothers and sisters hostage. The hostages are Israelis, Americans, foreign citizens, Muslims, Christians, Jews, children, elderly, men, women. We have not forgotten, and we will not let the world forget. And especially in a month that is supposed to be about women, we are not going to forget that there are 19 women being held hostage, teenagers, elderly, and a mother with 2 beautiful babies. They have endured unspeakable and unimaginable horrors on the morning of October 7th. They watched their friends and families murdered, many were injured, some were raped, and then they were taken and have been held for 163 days. I cannot imagine the trauma and terror. This is a crime against humanity. We are not going to forget, and we are not going to let the world forget. Let's make our voices heard for Israeli women and against gender-based violence globally. Today, we will hear from family members of some of the hostages, from a first-hand witness to the October 7th massacre, from community leaders, and from some true friends of Israel who have the moral clarity to call out Hamas's evil and demand that Hamas release the hostages immediately. First, I'd like to welcome community leader Alexandra Herzog, Deputy Director of AJC, the American Jewish Committee.
Hi, everyone. I just got back from Israel, where I was attending the first global conference of Jewish leaders since October 7. We went to the Nova Festival site, spoke with survivors, and visited the grounds of kibbutzim that were decimated during October 7. The devastation that I witnessed was beyond any words. I thought I knew what to expect. I thought I was ready, but I was wrong. Entire homes were burned to the ground and reduced to mere ashes, broken glass crackling under your feet, reminiscent of Kristallnacht and another time in history, the strong smell of burnt and the silence of death. I walked through the ruins of what used to be a beautiful community, tears falling down my cheeks, as I was trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Everything was frozen in time, like a terrifying time capsule that you don't want to relive. Children's drawings on a standing wall for the high holidays, little pomegranate sculptures burnt, kids' shoes at the entrance of the school. In kibbutz near Oz, there were posters at the entrance of the cafeteria about a rally for peace and for cooperation with the Palestinians of Gaza, which was ironically scheduled for after Shabbat on that very day of October 7. In front of the Bibas family house, we lit candles, praying all together, Jews and non-Jews from all over the world, by the statues of two little red-head babies. One of the Nova Festival survivors told us that what she witnessed and how she thought she had survived only because she was wearing her grandmother's pearls. Wearing pearls at a rave party was an odd choice, she joked, but she realized that these pearls belonged to her grandmother who had survived the Holocaust. She felt they had somehow protected her. The whole time I was in Israel, I listened. I paid attention to what was said and to what couldn't be uttered. I understood very quickly that the scope of the horror that happened there was bigger than any words could convey. Women were the target, a survivor told me, before adding, but somehow no one believes us. It has been roughly 5.5 months, and we are already seeing October 7 distortion and denials, claims that Israel made the scope of the atrocities up. As we were celebrating International Women's Day and the achievement of women a few days ago, it is unfathomable to accept rape and sexual violence as a weapon of war. It is unfathomable to question women's voices. If you stand for women's rights, then you ought to stand for all women's rights, including Israeli and Jewish women. Yet, the silence and the delayed response of many women's organizations have been deafening. Pramila Patten, the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, recently issued a report that found reasonable grounds to believe that sexual assaults, including rape and the mutilation of female bodies, had taken place on October 7, and that there were clear and convincing information that there was sexual violence and torture against some of those taken hostage, and that the violence may be ongoing. There are 19 women held hostage by Hamas among the 134 hostages still captive in Gaza. Do not forget them. Don't be silent. Be their voices. Demand their release. Each one of them has a family and a village of people who cannot breathe, whose pain is written all over their eyes, who have been walking with a hole in their heart for 23 weeks, 163 days. We must all decry and forcefully condemn the systematic sexual violence of October 7 and the use of rape as a tool of war. It is never acceptable. And we must ask every single day for the release of the hostages. And say it loudly and clearly with me right now. Bring them all home. Thank you very much. And now it's my absolute honor to introduce a champion in the state of Massachusetts legislature, an amazing champion and advocate for the Jewish community, Representative Ruth Boler, who represents parts of Newton and Brookline.
Thank you. Oh, it's beautiful to see all of you here together. As I walked through the exhibit, that amazingly painful, powerful exhibit, what went through my mind was that there are no words. There are no words to describe the horror. But then I heard a voice responding to that thought that said, there have to be words because we can't be silent. We have to name it. We have to call it. We have to shout it out because so many people are being silent. I was brought up in this country to an American Jewish family in the shadow of the Holocaust, a few years after the Holocaust. And my parents of blessed memory, they taught me very early about the horrors that our people had experienced. But they told me, as part of the way they explained it to me, they said, as horrible as the perpetrators were, maybe they didn't use that word when I was small, as horrible as they were, what was even worse was those who stood by in silence and let it happen. So as we witness or hear the deafening silence around what happened to women on October 7th, we have to call out this brutality, this vicious using of women as a target of war, the most horrible gender-based violence, sexual attacks that we can imagine. There's a lot of political debate. I'm in politics, so I watch it and I listen to it. There's debate in this country, there's debate in Israel about where to go, what to do. But there's got to be no debate about the crimes against humanity, the crimes against women, and the sexual violence, the abduction. And anyone who calls for ceasefire or whatever anyone calls for, we make sure they call out and hold responsible the vicious people who attacked women on that day and make sure they are held to account, make sure that everyone, every woman, everyone is brought home and that nothing happens until that happens. Here on On Women's History Month, usually, I and the state legislature, usually Women's History Month, we're so joyous. We celebrate the advances women have made. We celebrate our women leaders who've brought about so much change. And this year, this Women's History Month feels very different because all I can do is weep for what happened to the women on October 7th. And I'm honored that you asked me to join you, and please know that all of us working together will make sure that we scream the truth out to the world and that there's no silence about what this happened, and we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Moshe Amelia Levy and Effie Avsker. Moshe is the brother-in-law of hostage Omri Miran. Moshe's sister and nieces were also held by Hamas for hours on October 7th. Effie is the aunt of 12-year-old Eitan Yahalomi, who was held alone for many, many days and then ultimately released by Hamas in November. She's also the sister of Ohad, who is still held captive in Gaza.
My name is Effie. I have a brother, Ohad. He, with his partner, Batsheva, and their 3 young kids, lived in kibbutz Nir Oz, near the Gaza border. On the morning of October 7th, several Hamas terrorists armed with machine guns and grenades broke into their home, threw grenades, shot and wounded Ohad, and kidnapped Batsheva and their 3 kids, a 12-year-old boy, Eitan, a 10-year-old girl, and a 20-month-old baby. They were taken with 2 motorcycles. While riding on the motorcycles with the terrorists toward Gaza, Batsheva seized an opportunity and in an immense feat of courage, made a split-second decision to save her young girls and escape, only to see her son, Eitan, continuing on the other motorcycle and disappearing into Gaza. It was 52 agonizing days and nights until she got to see her boy again when he was released in the last hostages deal. Later on that Saturday, another group of terrorists came to their house and kidnapped Ohad too. Many of you are fathers and mothers. Try to imagine a quiet morning. You and your young kids are forced out of your home by an armed gang. You are forced to leave your beloved partner wounded. You see your community burned and looted. You and your kids are forcibly kidnapped by the murderous gang. And now you need to decide in a split second if you have your little girl, if you save your little girls, but leave your little boy to be alone. Then you make the decision, and you see him disappearing from your eyes. You return to safety with your girls, but your boy is not with you. For 52 days, you don't know if he's alive or dead. You don't know if he's completely alone or if someone takes care of him. You do know his anxieties. You do know that he didn't even go to sleepover with friends because he was too anxious to be away from you. I'm a mother, and I don't even want to start imagining this. No mother shall be forced to imagine this. And yet, Batsheva had to live and endure this in her very real life, as so many other Israeli mothers. Many of them are still living through this nightmare. Ohad, my little brother, Batsheva's partner, Eitan and the girl's father, is still in Gaza, wounded for 163 days, enduring torture and suffering. All of you who are sisters, imagine your little brother with whom you grew up through all your childhood, quarreled him in the backseat of the family car, was immensely proud of him when he grew up into the most honorable and good-hearted person that he is. Spent so many holiday dinners, camping trips, and hikes with him and his family. Imagine that now it is 163 days that you don't know anything of what's happening with him. You just know that it's all bad things. I don't need to imagine this. I live it. I feel it every moment of my life. I don't wish anyone to feel this ever. Bring Ohad home now. Bring all our hostages home now.
Thank you, everyone who came here today. I'm encouraged to see all of you here, but I'm also dispirited that 5 months in, only you came. In a city of 700,000 people or so, there are a few hundred people here. For me, this is a shocking disappointment, because the issue of the hostages should not be a political issue. It should be a humanitarian issue. It should be a multi-faith issue. People of 5 different faiths and atheists were kidnapped. It should be an international issue because people of countless countries were kidnapped. And so I thank you, but I'm sad to see that only you came. My name is Moshe. I'm the brother-in-law of Omri Miran, who was kidnapped on October 7 from Kibbutz Nachal Oz. I can speak about the story of his kidnapping for hours, about the abuse he and my courageous sister and brave two nieces went through for hours while they were captive by Hamas terrorists in their home, later grouped with another family, and eventually separated. But those stories were told countless times, and sadly all of them are dreadful. And if you haven't heard about his story or the story of the other 253 or so hostages who were kidnapped on October 7, then I implore you to go after this demonstration and read about all of them. I'm here to share with you who Omri is, because we need to humanize the hostages. Hostages is a political term, and because we keep using it, we stop understanding that there are human beings behind that concept, behind that term. Omri is a 46-year-old man. He's a shiatsu therapist and a gardener in Kibbutz Nachal Oz. He heals plants during the day and people during the evenings in his clinic in the kibbutz. He's an amazing father to my 2 baby nieces, Roni and Alma. Roni is 2.5 years old. Alma will be celebrating her first birthday at the end of this month. A dark birthday that will mark most probably half a year without her father. He's the most supportive husband we could have hoped as a family to my sister Lishai, who grew up in southern Israel with us in Sderot and married Omri in March 2020. When the world closed down and the pandemic hit us, they met, fell in love, created a beautiful family, built a home, a loving and warm home in Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Omri loves traveling, he loves nature, spiritual man connected both to his Judaism and to Far East cultures. He traveled in India for a year, he studied shiatsu, which is a Japanese healing art. His favorite author is Haruki Murakami. He loves sports, supporting the same team our family supports, luckily, Maccabi Tel Aviv. And I miss him every day. And I can't imagine how much his father Danny misses him, how much his siblings are missing him, and how much my sister and 2 nieces are missing him. My sister went through hours of captivity and dread and violence on October 7. She survived. A day after, despite the trauma, despite the wounds, she got up and said, I'm going to advocate on every possible stage I'm going to speak on every possible platform. I'm going to rally everywhere I can and meet any leader that will be willing to meet me in order to say it loud and clear. Bring Omri home. Bring them all home. I'm going to end this conversation because this is not a speech. I want you to treat this as a conversation. And when you have a conversation, you take notes and you know that you have to do some things next. And so I'm going to give you some notes to take so that more and more people will understand what they need to do to support the families of hostages. Because we need you. The first thing I want you to do is to go to the Hostages and Missing Families Forum website. That forum was established on October 8 by the families, for the families. That website will provide you all the information you need to know how to mobilize, how to donate, buy a dog tag or a bring them home pin, for example, how to set up events, how to support the families. We need you with us. That's the first step you should take if you haven't taken it yet. The second step you should take is learn about every hostage, whether they were released or are still held captive. We shared with you 2 stories here today. Share them, but don't forget the rest. Share them until they're all home. The third thing you should do is to reach out to your elected officials. Here in the US, you can go to 1 Minute a Day. We set up a website for you, and with your morning coffee or tea, you can call your elected officials in Washington, D.C., the same people we meet on a regular basis, sadly, and remind them that they need to work harder to find a formula to bring them home. Alternatively, you can go to LifeShifter and another website we set up for you and write an email to your elected officials. And today, you should go home and write to Prime Minister Netanyahu. He has an email. Every member of the Knesset has an email. Just go to the Knesset website and find it. And remind him that he needs to work hard to bring home the hostages in the name of humanity and in honor of Jewish ethics and belief in redeeming our captives, our hostages. And the fourth thing I will ask you to do is to keep being present, no matter how small your number is, no matter how large your number is. Be present on the streets, be present on social media, share the content we create for the hostages. If you're on Instagram or X or TikTok or in any other platform, share that content. Doesn't matter how many people are following your account online. If you share one video a day, if you share one statement you made a day, the 10 followers you have or the 10,000 followers you have may see it. And they may be compelled to get to know Omri and Oad and the rest 132 hostages who are still held captive by Hamas terrorists. October 7 marked a dark day in our history, and on this specific month, we should all remember it marked a dark day in the history of Jewish, Israeli, and simply women who were injured, raped, abused, murdered, and kidnapped on October 7. Whether they are healing now in a safe place, are still held captive in the Gaza Strip, or are sadly buried underground. We were not there for them as a world, as an international community. So keep reminding your colleagues, your friends, your classmates. Keep reminding the world, as we reminded last week the UN Secretary General, both of us in his office in New York, as we reminded the director of UNICEF, as we reminded on Friday, in the past 2 Fridays, to the head of UN Women, they cannot be silent. We will not be silent no matter how many people are behind us, but we need you behind us because it's been 5 months and we're exhausted. So I hope this message will be marked in your hearts. We will continue doing this and meet leaders and go to communities and do all we can to bring our loved ones home. Keep being with us. Let's bring them home. Thank you.
Thank you, Effie and Moshe. I can't imagine how hard this is for you, and there really are no words, but you found powerful words nonetheless. I hope you can feel the love and support here today and know that our hearts are with you. Next, I'd like to call Peggy Schuker, Vice President of East Division of the ADL.
Moshe and Effie, we hear you and we're here for you. The many voices we've heard today continue to fill us with outrage, with anger, and they need to continue to fuel our action. They've restored the human face that others have tried to obscure by numbers, by statistics, and by using those numbers and statistics to remove the reality that everyone is facing. So as we stand united to focus on this tragedy and the harm that it continues to inflict on our sisters, on the hostages, on our Jewish family and our global family, simply because they were either Jewish or in the Jewish state, many because they were simply women, it's on us now to be their voices and to be their faces. So as we recommit ourselves to doing so, I want to offer up a framework that we use at ADL. Speak up, as we're doing today. Share facts. Moshe gave us many specific, tangible things each of us can do every day. And many of us need to continue to do this to thwart those false and harmful narratives that are trying to erase the reality of what happened on October 7th. And continue to show strength, which we are doing today by bearing witness, by standing united, and by our commitment to act in unison. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Next, I'd like to invite Gal, a cousin of hostage 1-year-old Kfir Bibas, 4-year-old Ariel Bibas, and their mother Shiri Bibas, and their father Yarden Bibas. Thank you.
Thank you all for gathering here today to stand in solidarity and continue our unwavering fight for the release of the hostages. I stand before you to ensure that the events of October 7th remain etched in our memories, to resist any normalization of the absence of our loved ones in Gaza. I called my mom today and say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to speak anymore. I've spoken to many of you. I've told many of you the stories of my family. But this will be hopefully the last one. My name is Gal. On October 7th, my mom's cousin, Margit, and her husband were brutally murdered in Kibbutz Nir Oz. Alongside them, Shiri, her husband Yarden, and their two beautiful children, Ariel and Kfir Bibas, were horrifically taken from their home. I believe many of you are familiar with their stories. As we commemorate Women's History Month, it's essential to recognize the 19 women held captive by Hamas for over 163 days. Among them, Shiri, alongside her young children in the hostile confines of Gaza. 5 months, 1 week, and 6 days, a relentless passage of time. Since the heart-wrenching video emerged of Shiri shielding Ariel and Kfir, we've been consumed by worry. Where are you? Are you safe? How do you find the strength to preserve in such unimaginable circumstances and protect yourself? Ariel and Kfir, do you know and feel us sending you strength and our love? Shiri, a true embodiment of resilience. I was told by your closed ones that you always wanted to be a mother and embody motherhood, placing the well-being of your children and the children you take care of above all else. The depth of your fortitude surpasses my comprehension. But enough is enough. Even the mightiest of superheroes have their limits. It's long overdue to bring you home, to envelop you in the care and support you so desperately need and deserve. It's time to reassure Shiri. She is not alone. We miss her dearly. And as such, we continue to amplify our efforts and voice to demand the release of her and all the hostages. I conclude with an impactful reflection from Yarden's sister. A couple of days ago, she said, "Bli atid shelach en lanu atid." The release of Shiri and the remaining hostages is not just about wanting to see their future flourish, but the future of us, the future of a nation. Without it, we cannot, I will not move forward. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Gal. Next, I'd like to call Leslie Gonzalez, past president of Hadassah Boston and a national Hadassah leader.
Thank you for having me and for bearing witness. My name is Leslie Gonzalez, and I am the immediate past president of Hadassah Boston, and I stand here today representing over 300,000 members of Hadassah, the largest women's Zionist organization in the United States. Hadassah owns and operates 2 hospitals in Jerusalem, including the only level 1 trauma center in the area. Since Hamas attacked Israel and the war began, our hospitals have been on the front lines, treating the most severely wounded and providing comprehensive rehabilitation services, as well as much-needed mental health outreach and therapies. The scope and scale of the injuries and destruction are devastating. Long before October 7th, Hadassah's Bat Ami Center for Victims of Sexual Abuse has been working to heal sexual abuse victims physically, mentally, and emotionally with advanced treatment methods. The director of Bat Ami says that the horrific sexual violence that took place on October 7th is unlike anything she has witnessed in her 20-year career, providing details that are unimaginable and unspeakable. Another Hadassah gynecologist says that the sexual violence and terrorism committed by Hamas is sheer barbarism, with victims severely mutilated and abused. And a Hadassah dentist was called upon to help identify bodies using dental records because the bodies were mutilated, disfigured, and burnt beyond recognition. What Hamas did on October 7th was a systematic and planned attack to sexually abuse, rape, and torture as many Israeli women and girls as they could. Yet, despite the witnesses, despite the irrefutable facts of what happened and what is likely continuing with the hostages still in captivity, the world has looked away. This silence is deafening and cannot continue, which is why Hadassah launched a global campaign to end the silence and speak out against rape as a weapon of war. Yep. Last week, Hadassah National President Carol Ann Schwartz hand-delivered our petition, signed by nearly 130,000 individuals from 118 countries, to UN Secretary General Guterres, along with a joint letter of support from 116 organizations demanding that the UN conduct an independent, trauma-informed, unbiased investigation into these crimes and pursue justice for the victims. We will continue to speak out to collectively raise all of our voices. We must continue to push our international institutions to hold Hamas accountable, to make it clear that kidnapping, raping, and torturing are not to be tolerated. Not in Israel, not anywhere. We were circulating these cards. The QR code goes directly to that petition. Please join us in signing that #EndTheSilence card and make your voice count. And now, let's get loud. Please join me and say, end the silence on this sexual violence. End the silence on this sexual violence. End the silence on this sexual violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to call Sarah Ovadia, Director of Development of the Lapin Foundation.
I'm honored to welcome Oz Dividian on behalf of Lapin Foundation, whose mission is to enhance Jewish identity across generations in the Jewish community and beyond. Jewish tradition teaches that whoever saves a life saves an entire world. Because of Oz's singular rescue efforts, 120 young men and women are breathing today, and future generations will continue to live, thrive, and continue to fight for our democratic values and strong future. Oz Dividian is a husband and father to 4 beautiful children. The youngest one is Shachar, she's 2 years old. Oz is a farmer at heart and a helper in his soul. 25 years ago, while a police officer, Oz helped his father establish a farm near Kibbutz Re'im, next to the festival. Working the land was in Oz's DNA, but after his father's death, he didn't have the heart to go back there. Oz spent the next 10 years working as an independent attorney until 2 years ago when he returned to public service as a negotiation team member at the Bedouin Authority. Oz and his family were awakened by sirens at 6:20 a.m. on October 7th. After settling his family into the mamad, the safety room, he went up to the roof and he saw a sky full of flashes of rockets being intercepted. This was unlike anything Oz had seen before. When Oz returned to the safe room, he received a message from his sister and the family on a WhatsApp group. His sister and her husband lived next to the festival site. She told him her husband was out at 5:30 this morning and kids were panicking toward him and let him know the terrorists had breached into the festival area. Oz told his sister that he was on his way to help. Oz, tell us what you saw that morning on your way on the road 232 into the festival.
בבוקר של שמחת תורה יצאתי מהמושב לכיוון רעים לאזור שטח המסיבה.
This morning of Simchat Torah, I came out from Re'im area towards the Nova Festival.
בדרך לשטח המסיבה אני רואה עשרות גרופות של ילדים צעירים פזורים על השטח.
On the way there, I saw tens of bodies of youth, children, dead bodies scattered all over the space on the way there.
אני נוסע בשביל ונכנס לשטח המסיבה ולאורך כל הדרך אני רואה מכוניות בוערות וגופות של ילדים נמצאים בצידי הדרך שכובים על הרצפה.
When I ride there, I see on the sides, on both sides of the road, cars in fires and bodies of young children and youth just scattered all over the place.
אני רואה מכוניות בוערות ואנשים ירויים בתוך הרכבים.
Cars burning and people shot in the cars.
אני נכנס לשטח המסיבה ואני רואה ילדים רצים ואני שומע את יריות המחבלים.
I get into the festival area and I see youth and children just running all over the place, screaming.
אני נוסע לכיוון הילדים הראשונים שאני רואה, אני אוסף אותם בתוך הרכב, מכניס את כולם ומחזיר אותם לכיוון המושב שלי, מסלול ומושב פטיש.
The first group of children that I see running, I just pick them up, I bring them into my car and I take them back to the moshav where I came from, moshav Patish.
Oz, you were the first one there outside of the civilians in the area. And on one of the trips back with the party goers, tell us what they said. Me, Oz.
בדרך שחזרתי בנסיעות האלה שאני עושה מהבוקר עד הלילה עם הילדים, אז הילדה שישבה מאחריי פתאום אומרת לי באמצע הנסיעה, ממש אנחנו יוצאים משטח המסיבה, תגיד לי מי אתה?
So during that day that I've been picking up children and youth from the festival to back to the Moshav, so towards the end of the day, one young child, a girl, she just asked me, tell me who you are.
אמרתי לה שקוראים לי עוז, ואני סתם... ואני סתם מושבניק שבאתי לחלץ אותם.
I told her that my name was Oz. I live in the nearby Moshav and I came here for their rescue.
היא אומרת לי לא יכול להיות, תגיד לי מי אתה.
She says, this can't be true, just tell me who you are.
אני אומר לה, אני סתם מושבניק, למה את שואלת?
So I told her, I'm just living in the nearby Moshav. That's who I am. Why are you asking?
היא אומרת לי, תסתכל, אין פה אף אחד, תסתכל, אין פה אף אחד. אנחנו תקועות כאן 8 שעות שהחברים שלנו נהרגים ונרצחים לידינו.
So she said, look around, there is nobody here. We are here for 8 hours. Our friends are just got killed around us and there is no one here to help us.
אנחנו מתחבות 8 שעות בשטח, בשיחים, ואין פה אף אחד. אתה היחידי שהגיע לכאן להוציא אותנו.
So we've been hiding for the last 8 hours in the bush around, and there was no one else but you that came in to help us and rescue.
אמרתי לה שאנחנו בשטח מסוכן, שיחזיקו חזק, ירדתי לוואדי וברחתי דרך השטחים לכיוון המושב.
So I told them that the area, the road is dangerous. I asked them to hold tight, and I just took to the side through the valley, and through the valley we drove to the moshav.
Oz, you did what few can imagine. Oz. Oz, tell us unfathomable heroism. Tell us the message that you would like to share with everybody today.
אני רוצה להגיד לכם שהיום הקשה הזה, אני לקחתי ממנו את הטוב שהיה בזה, והראינו לעולם מה זאת אהבת אחים.
So I want to tell you that from that horrifying day, I took the good part of it. We have showed the world what is brotherly love.
איך אנשים כמוני ועוד אלפי אזרחים ישראלים יצאו בבוקר להילחם ולהגן על האחים שלהם בלי בכלל שהם הכירו אותם ומתו למענם.
Thousands of Israeli citizens just left their homes this morning. They went out to fight for their brothers, people that they never knew before, to fight for them.
ביום הזה המחבלים הרגו אותנו גם כיהודים, אבל הם גם רצחו את כל מה שהיה בישראל. הם רצחו נוצרים, הם רצחו מוסלמים, בדואים, חברים שלי, מוסלמים שנרצחו, הם רצחו עובדים זרים מכל מיני מדינות מהעולם שהיו בישראל.
On that day, the Hamas killed us, the Jews, but they also killed other people residing in Israel, Muslim, Christians, citizens of other countries.
יש לנו עכשיו בעזה 134 חטופים, ילדים, נשים, זקנים, כל מה שיש בארץ ישראל, מוסלמים, בדואים, נוצרים, עובדים זרים.
We have now in Gaza 134 hostages, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Bedouins, and citizens of other countries are held hostages now in Gaza.
אני יכול להבטיח לכם שאנחנו כעם היהודי וכמדינת ישראל, אנחנו נחזיר את כולם הביתה.
I can promise you that the state of Israel and the Jewish community, we will all together bring the hostages home. I can promise that.
Amen. Amen. אנחנו לא משאירים אף אחד מאחור. מאז ומתמיד היינו תמיד אחד בשביל השני, ולעולם לא השארנו מישהו מאחור, ולכן תהיו בטוחים שאנחנו נחזיר את כולם הביתה. יהיה המחיר אשר יהיה, כולם יגיעו הביתה.
We're not leaving anybody behind. We've always been one for all and all for one. And be sure that we will bring all of them back home.
אני רוצה בהזדמנות הזאת להודות לשרה עובדיה ולקרן לפין שהביאו אותי לכאן, כי אני לא יצאתי מישראל ולא דיברתי בשום מקום, כי לא יכולתי.
So I want to thank Sarah and Lapin Foundation from bringing me here. Before I couldn't leave Israel because I could not talk about this. It was very difficult for me to talk about this.
התודה שלי על זה שהם חיבקו אותי, חיזקו אותי והביאו אותי לכאן לספר לא רק לכם, אלא לכל העולם, שיראה מה הם עשו לנו ואיך הם רצחו בנו.
So my thanks is to Sarah and the Lapin Foundation for bringing me here, not only for bringing me, but also for the opportunity to tell my story, to tell not only you, but to tell the whole world what Hamas did to us, and to tell the terrible story.
אני מחזק את החיילים שלנו שנלחמים עכשיו בעזה, ואני גאה בהם.
I want to encourage our soldiers that are now fighting in Gaza, and I'm very proud of them.
עם ישראל חי, עם ישראל חי.
Thank you, Oz. Again, no words. Next, I'd like to call Elizabeth Keeley, who spent many years as a prosecutor focusing on the crimes against women and working in human trafficking division at the DA's office.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today. I'm thankful for this opportunity to speak in support of the hostages and against the war crimes that have been perpetrated by Hamas terrorists. My name is Beth Keeley. I've been an attorney here in Massachusetts for over 15 years, but the majority of my career has been focused on litigating victim-based crimes and working with survivors of sexual violence and exploitation. I began my career as a prosecutor in Suffolk County in Boston, and I worked there on various cases of sex abuse, including child sexual abuse, sexual assault cases, and I eventually became Suffolk County's inaugural chief of its human trafficking and exploitation unit. After about 10 years in Suffolk County, I went over to the Attorney General's office under now Governor, then AG Maura Healey, to lead the statewide human trafficking division for over 5 years. As the chief of that division. And so during my 15 years working as a prosecutor, I've investigated and prosecuted numerous cases involving allegations of sexual abuse and or sexual violence. And throughout my work as a prosecutor, and now as an advocate for survivors in my private practice, I've come to understand that those who've been harmed and injured as a result of sexual violence often feel ashamed, alone, and disempowered. Victims of sexual violence may often feel afraid to speak and feel silenced with the threat of intense shame and even guilt. And worse yet, in the case of the victims in Israel, the abuse and terror of sexual violence are weaponized as torture. We can and must do better on behalf of these victims. Victims of sexual violence require our support and the understanding that we see them and we support them. We can and we must empower them with our solidarity. We can give voice to their trauma by speaking up and speaking out on their behalf, just as we are doing here today. Sexual violence and rape are inexcusable and unjustifiable. In this case, where the sexual terror has been accompanied by massacre and death, it's unknown whether any prosecution of many of these horrendous sex crimes will be possible. And sadly, this is not the first instance of sexual violence as war crime. But with all of this in mind, it's even more incumbent upon us to speak up and speak out in this case, and in every case where sexual violence is weaponized, but in this case, absolutely. We can see and recognize what has taken place here. We must give voice to those whose voices have been taken from them. That is our call to action, to be voices for the victims, to take up the voice of survivor advocate on their behalf. They will not be forgotten, and we will not be ashamed. We are here, and we will continue to speak up and speak out in love and solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to call our last speaker for today, Destiny Alberton, Senior Director of Next Generation Christians United for Israel.
Thank you. My name is Destiny Albritton. I'm the Senior Director of Next Gen at Christians United for Israel. Supporting Israel and the Jewish people is our prime mission at Christians United for Israel. We are working relentlessly with our over 10 million members around the world to make Israel stronger and her people safer. As a Christian, thank you. As a Christian, it is an honor to be here with you, and it is an honor to stand with you in solidarity as we remember and advocate for the 19 women held captive by Hamas as we speak. Supporting Jewish women holds significant importance to me. Since I was a little girl growing up in a Christian home in Missouri, I've looked up to Jewish women. I wouldn't knowingly meet a Jewish person until I was 18 or 19 years old, but my whole life, Jewish women have been my role models. When I was a child, thank you. When I was a child and I didn't want to go to bed on time, what do all kids say? Mom, tell me a bedtime story. My mom would tell me the story of a Jewish woman who was taken from her home. She was taken from her family, but she became queen of Persia, and God used her to rescue the Jewish people. My mom would tell me of how Mordecai's famous words challenging Esther to bravery. He said, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you are made queen for such a time as this? She would go on to tell me how Esther's courage saved the Jewish people from destruction, and their enemies were destroyed instead. It is my life's mission to ensure every Christian familiar with that story understands that Queen Esther's people lived, they lived on after that, and in 2024, they still face dark times they should not face alone. October 7th was an attack on Israel, the only safe haven for the Jewish people against anti-Semitism. But the barbarity directed at Jewish women made this assault distinct. Sexual violence is never acceptable. The inability of women's groups and decent human beings to denounce the heinous sexual violence Hamas perpetrated on that day is sickening, and we will never shut up about it. We at CUFI will never shut up about it. Hamas's sympathizers in the West who turn a blind eye to these evils simply because the victims were in Israel, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. Rape is not resistance. We stand in solidarity with every victim of sexual violence, especially those harmed and abused on October 7th. That should be easy for everyone. As we all know, March is Women's History Month, a month where we celebrate our strength, our creativity, unique abilities, and valuable achievements as women. Women's History Month should be a time of celebration for every woman, and that includes Jewish women everywhere. We know 19 Israeli women remain in Hamas captivity in Gaza. Say their names with me. Naama, Judy, Noah, Romy, Arbel, Carmel, Maya, Eden, Inbar, Daron, Leary, Daniela, Shira, Shani, Karina, Amit, Agam, Ofra, Amelia. We will not forget them. We will keep saying their names, and they will remain in our prayers. We will never forget the women who were murdered or injured on October 7th. We will never forget the women who have lost sons, brothers, husbands, and fathers. We will never forget the women serving in the IDF to protect the hope of the Jewish people to be a free people in their own land. God bless you. It has been 163 days since October 7th. 163 days of the hostages held captive. 163 days Israel has been at war. And 163 days the Jewish community in America has been feeling alone like this generation has never seen before. Please know that you are not alone. We, Christians United for Israel, we stand with you. And as long as there is breath in my lungs, I will stand with you and stand with Jewish women. Thank you.
Thank you, Destiny, for reminding us that each and every one of us not only can, but must be a Queen Esther in our days. I'd like to give a huge shout out to Eilit, who once again brings us together as a community crossing the rivers. It is true, Effie, 500 people is not enough. And when we come together, we at Harvard Chabad, for one, resolve that tomorrow, when we welcome back our community from spring break, we'll do everything we can to remind our community that for our Israeli brothers and sisters, there is no break. Until we bring every single one of our hostages home, there is no break. For thousands of years, throughout the centuries, during good times and during horrific times, Jewish women have been lighting candles every Friday to welcome Shabbat, a testament to our resolve to bring light into a world that wreaks havoc, violence, and terror. This week, let us band together, women of all ages, of all communities, and let us commit to lighting a Shabbat candle, both to illuminate the pain and intolerable reality that is today, and as importantly, to remind the world that we are here to stay. We will not lose hope, we will not lose faith, and we will only strengthen our resolve to bring our sisters home. Let us bring them home so that they too can join their families and communities in lighting their weekly Shabbat candle. It is my honor to welcome Jason Greenberg, a cousin of Ophir Caldron, to say a prayer for the hostages.
Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers today, especially Oz. May he who blessed our fathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and our mothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, bless and protect and guard those who were abducted from the Israel Defense Forces and the hostages amongst our brethren in the house of Israel, who are placed in trouble and in captivity. For we here are praying on their behalf. May the Holy One, blessed be he, have compassion upon them, and bring them out from darkness and the shadow of death. May he break their bonds, deliver them from distress, and bring them back safely to their families' embrace. Give thanks to the Lord for his loving kindness and for the wonders he does for the children of men. And may there be fulfilled in them the verse, "Those redeemed by the Lord will return. They will enter Zion with singing and everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. And let us say amen. Amen. Thank you.
I again want to thank and celebrate all of you who came out today. You have moral clarity, and you are brave. Unfortunately, there are many voices we are not hearing, either because they lack moral clarity, they have been corrupted by the Hamas enablers, or because they are simply not courageous enough to just say, bring our girls home. Elizabeth Warren, Ayanna Pressley, where are you? Women's Health and Women's Rights Community of Boston, where are your voices? Why aren't you standing up against Hamas evil? Why aren't you standing up for the rights of Israeli women? Why aren't you crying, bring our girls home? How is it okay for you to stand silent in the face of crimes against Israeli women? By doing so, you betray all women. But make no mistake, while your silence has been deafening, those of us here today will not stand silent. We will give each other strength. We will remind the world that we will not go like sheep to the slaughterhouse. We are children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, or just students of history, and we know exactly what happens to Jews if we don't have the ability to defend ourselves. So to the Hamas supporters of the world, you will have to excuse us if we are not willing to let that happen again. We will not leave our girls in the Hamas tunnels. We will not forget any of the hostages in Hamas captivity. We will continue to gather peacefully. We will not wreak havoc like those on the other side. We will not bang drums or intimidate with threats and violence and shouts of thinly coded slogans like Intifada, which we all know means kill the Jews. No, we will continue to shine light on evil and call for true peace. And we know any road towards true peace must start with the immediate return of all the hostages. Boston, Massachusetts, we say, bring them home now. Free our women. Let our people go. And one more time so the whole world can hear it. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Amazing and so heartwarming. I pray that our cries are answered. Now let's sing together a song that cries for the release of the hostages, from darkness to light, from the worst kind of oppression to true freedom.
הנתונים בצרה, בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין ביום ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה